Hello friends and welcome to my channel. In this video I want to tell you why I think storytelling is a great way to make research more accessible. I hope you'll find my story about this topic useful, particularly for any digital projects that you may be creating to share your own research. Storytelling in my 360-degree video project was important because it allowed us to deliver research messages in ways that were more meaningful, realistic and relatable for the learners. Many of whom walked away from the training really engaged, enthused and ready to make positive changes with the children and families that they worked with. So in this video I'd like to explore with you questions such as why use storytelling to deliver research messages, and why create a fictional family as a focus for the stories? How were the research findings used to co-produce the stories with professionals and young people? How did we ensure that the stories remained faithful to the original research messages during the filming? What were some of the relationship-based practices from the research that we highlighted? And finally, what did the learners think about the process of engaging with the stories? While you can watch this video on its own, I'll be making references to my previous videos where I talk in much more detail about why 360-degree video headsets are a good way of sharing sensory-rich research findings in the different human services fields such as health and social care. The links to my other videos are available below. So why use storytelling to deliver research messages? To deliver really impactful learning, in my experience, I've found that you have to leave the learner feeling emotions. If you think about your own learning, be it in training, the classroom or in life in general, you tend to remember lessons better where an experience leaves you feeling some type of emotion. Many times reading journal articles may not trigger the same emotions as, for example, following a story over a period of time, where you begin to invest in the different characters. I've worked with many professionals who say that they struggle to find the time to read research articles, and this is a pity because keeping up with research is important to maintain up-to-date practices, which is why I think video is a great way of delivering research messages. To develop my thinking further in this area, before I started the project, I started to look around and found a great book by a guy called Matthew Dix, and the book is called Storyworthy, and in it he writes about how you can pass on learning through engaging and powerful storytelling. This is a really good book, and if you're interested in this topic, I've put a link below to the book if you want to explore it further. So the question that intrigued me was, is storytelling a better way to make research findings more accessible and bring about positive changes in relationship-based child protection practices? Well, I wanted to find out, so I thought I'd give storytelling a go in my 360-degree video project. The reason we created a fictional family to carry the story was because the family could act as a vehicle around which we could illustrate the lessons from our research findings. This made sense because in the original research, the links to which are provided below, we followed families, social workers and their managers for sometimes up to 12 months. We recorded not only their journeys through the child protection system, but also their emotions, thoughts and actions, essentially the stories of their journeys. So when creating this project, it made absolute sense that we should follow a single family story over the 11 months of engaging with the social worker and system to see how they were able or not to develop an effective working relationship with each other. If you've watched the previous videos, you'll know that we created two versions of the same scenes in this project, so that we had an enabler and a barrier version of the same scenarios. So creating a fictional family gave us a great method to illustrate effective and not so effective relationship-based practices in child protection work. So how did the storylines remain faithful to the original research messages during the filming? We used two stages to make sure that the storylines we co-produced remained faithful to the original research messages during the filming process. In the first stage, we wanted to co-produce the work with social workers and young people who had experience of being in the child protection system. This was important because we wanted a level of authenticity in the stories. So in developing the storylines, I worked with a great colleague called Pauline Dunkwu from Sandwell Children's Trust. The first steps we took in creating the stories was to draw together the relationship-based practice messages from the research findings. These were mainly based on the following 3 published papers. The first was Hostile Relationships in Social Work Practice, Anxiety, Hate and Conflict in Long-Term Work with Involuntary Service Users. The second was Relationship-Based Practice and the Creation of Therapeutic Change in Long-Term Social Work as a Holding Relationship. The third one was Supervision in Child Protection, a Space and Place for Reflection, or an excruciating marathon of compliance. Pauline and I initially created a set of learning objectives for each of the 7 modules on the training courses, and we based these very clearly on the 3 papers that I've just mentioned. We held the learning objectives in mind as we created the fictional family and sketched out a set of scenarios and timelines for the family and social worker's journey over the 11 months of the 7 modules. Pauline and I then co-produced a set of draft scripts for each of the scenes that the learners would experience as part of the learning design. I've talked about the learning design in a previous video, so please do have a look at that for context. We then took these initial plans to a relationship-based champions group at the Trust and also a young people's group who had experience of being in the care system. We did this so that they could provide feedback about the authenticity of the storylines that we developed and the scenes from the child and family's point of view. So very briefly, this was one way that we used the research findings to co-produce the scenarios and scenes for the 360-degree films. The second stage involved the social workers from the Children's Trust who played the different characters in the story. During the filming, they helped to further refine the scripts by providing insights from the perspectives of the different roles they played. For example, the social worker, manager, father, mother, other professionals involved with the family, and so on. So you can tell that the development of the script had a degree of fluidity, but it had to remain faithful to the core research messages. To do this, during the filming, Pauline and I gave the actors direction in relation to the scenes and encouraged them to draw on their past experiences. And where appropriate, recall the emotions they themselves felt, based on their memories of their own practice experiences when they'd faced similar issues such as hostility, frustration, conflict, fears, and how they handled these situations in a good or not so good relationship-based way. An important factor of the process was that we were happy to refilm the scenes where we thought we didn't really meet the objectives of the scenarios. This helped us to adapt and improve on the original scripts, but all the while we were mindful that we didn't stray from the original research messages. So very succinctly, this was the process that helped us to remain faithful to the original research messages during the filming process. Some of the practices that we highlighted in the films aimed to demonstrate how social workers began, developed and sustained, or not, good relationships over 11 months with the family they worked with. This meant that the messages from all 3 of the research articles tended to overlap with the scenes we developed because social work practice in child protection is a complex business. It's difficult in this short video to tell you all about the different social work practices we aimed to highlight over the 2 days of training. So I hope you don't mind if I'm just going to share some of the social work practices the stories in the enabler films illustrated. Some of the practices were, for example, at the beginning of the relationship, they involved watching a manager allocating families thoughtfully to the social worker based on the social worker's workload, experiences and skills. Seeing the social worker at the beginning of the relationship finding out as much as possible about the family. Watching the social worker develop a working hypothesis and using a genogram to get an idea of family relationships. And going out with a clear plan to fill in any gaps that she might have in her knowledge. We also see the social worker being respectful and mindful of power imbalances, especially in the relationship that she's going to develop with the family. So for example, she apologises for being late for the first visit, and she's mindful that the family are concerned about her involvement, and so she picks up that they are anxious. Then what you see as the relationship develops is that the social worker is seen to be reliable, basically doing what she's promised, for example, sharing a plan before a core group meeting. The social worker also sees the parents and children outside of the family home and starts to become immersed in their day-to-day lives. You also see the social worker helping the family members learn new skills to improve the quality of their relationship with each other. From an organisational level, you see the impact that good supervision can have for the social worker. She talks to her supervisor about the hostility that she's facing and the impact that it's having on her emotions. And what they do is they problem solve this and think about ways of how she can maintain a good working relationship with the family despite the levels of hostility that she's facing. In terms of sustaining the relationship with the family, you see the social worker being aware of her own emotions when facing hostility and not engaging in responses that can make the situation worse. To do this, you see her demonstrating verbal and non-verbal skills to diffuse potentially hostile encounters. You also see the positives of having a manager that's accessible and willing to engage in deep conversations about her current work and the emotions that the social worker is feeling. It's more than just kind of compliance and tick box exercises in supervision. It's actually relational, deep problem solving exchanges that help the social worker think through the way they're going to work with the family. You also see the social worker connecting with the family's lived reality by being aware of external issues outside of the control of the family, such as housing and poverty, and the internal caring capacities and difficulties in terms of the relational issues they may be currently facing in the family itself. There are many, many more examples in the enabler and barrier films spread across the 7 modules. So what did we learn from the learners' engagement with the storytelling approach? Our evaluations showed that our learners consistently told us that storytelling as an approach gets them involved and they want the outcome to be successful for the family and the social worker, so they become emotionally invested in the journey and the story. This seems to suggest that the learners do feel a connection with the characters. Many of the learners said that they felt immersed with the story because the scenarios and the acting felt real and relatable to their own experiences, and they said that if that wasn't the case, then the learning wouldn't have been as effective. Some of the learners mentioned that some of the scenes that they witnessed they recognised from their own practice experiences, and this made them reflect on how they could have dealt with those situations in a different, more relational way. And the enabler versions demonstrated skills and approaches that they could adopt to improve their own relationship-based practices when working in situations where hostility, hate and conflict were present, and they could think through ways of making sure that there were positive relational outcomes. So, is storytelling a good way to make research findings more accessible and potentially bring about positive changes in child protection? My experiences from developing and evaluating this approach suggests that it is. I would really encourage you to try a similar approach yourself. Just start with a piece of research, a simple script, a phone to record a video, but make sure that the video is created to trigger discussion and see what develops. Well, that's my experience of exploring the question of whether storytelling can make research findings more accessible. If you found this video useful, please do like it and subscribe to the channel. You can watch the previous videos from the project using these links here, and I'll be talking more about this project in the next video, the link to which will appear once it's ready. If you have any questions or thoughts, please do put them in the comments section below. I hope you found some value from my experiences, and basically I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.